Hello everyone. For the month of October, I'm going to be trying something a little different on the channel. I'm going to be discussing a horror movie every Saturday up to and including on Halloween. So that's 5 horror reviews this month, along with my regular content, which will have a horror tint to it as well. About that is getting spooky this October. So with that out of the way, I want to begin with my first horror gem of the month. An American Werewolf in London is a movie I'd always heard of, but didn't know much about. I honestly thought it had something to do with that song, Werewolves of London, but much to my personal horror, that song never even plays in this movie. Complete missed opportunity. I watched this for the first time in July, kind of on a whim while stuck in quarantine, and I have to say it isn't really what I was expecting at all, but in a good way. An American Werewolf in London released in the summer of 1981 and was written and directed by John Landis. I guess it's a horror comedy, that's how it's described on Wikipedia at least. However, the movie isn't laugh-out-loud funny. Personally, I wouldn't categorize this as a comedy. It's a horror with some light comedic elements. The main character is a bit of a doof, and the situation he ends up in can be slightly silly, but there are also shots that are nightmare fuel. It's definitely a quirky movie, but I don't think it's a comedy. Though for the most part, the tonal blend works for the film. For those who are unfamiliar, the non-spoiler plot of this movie is as follows. 2 American college-age men are backpacking through England. On their way to London, they stop at the small-town pub, and immediately everyone in there is acting suspicious as hell. So our 2 young men get out of that creep show, and in a dark and stormy night, they are attacked by a werewolf. One of them survives, and hence, we have an American Werewolf in London. He ends up going to the hospital where a decent chunk of this movie takes place, under the pretenses that he was attacked by a lunatic, not a werewolf. We meet 2 nurses who sexually assault him, and a doctor who has a hard time believing in the paranormal, at first. From here, the movie proceeds probably how you expect it to. At this point in the movie, I was enjoying it, but for a film I heard so much about, I was honestly a little let down. For a while, the movie is just about this doofy dude recovering from an attack and getting flirty with a nurse who he likes to nibble on. But then, I got to a sequence that I was immensely satisfied with. I haven't seen all the werewolf movies in the world to pretend I'm an expert, but I have to say that the initial transformation into the werewolf and then the subsequent scenes of werewolf stalking were more than I knew that I wanted. For a movie that claims to be a horror comedy, these sequences made me really curious to see what an outright horror would have been like. The transformation into the werewolf comes after so much build-up that I have to give John Landis credit because it makes the scene of the transformation so satisfying. I feel like whenever I see a werewolf transformation in movies or TV, it usually just goes by pretty quickly or mostly off screen. Not in this movie. We see it all, and it looks painful, arduous, and horrific. The special effects are also out of this world. In 2020, I've still never seen anything quite like this. I was told this is a famous scene that I've somehow avoided seeing on YouTube my whole life. If you've never seen this scene, I highly recommend not looking it up and experiencing it within the full context of the movie. I think it's worth the build-up. After we got ourselves a werewolf, we intercut back and forth between the nurse and doctor doing random shit, and then back to the werewolf hunting in the full moon. These little scenes build in a way that I also have to respect. I'm completely speculating here, but to me it seems like Landis took some heavy inspiration from Jaws for how he shoots the werewolf for these scenes. You barely see him, just little glimpses. It's brilliant and adds to the mystery and horror of the situation. Towards the very end of the hunting scenes, there's an excellent chase through the subway, or tube if you're nasty. The way Landis positions the camera, traveling up and away from the werewolf on an escalator, gives the frame just enough room for the werewolf to creep in, and it is absolutely menacing, and it's the first time we see the full werewolf in the movie. In my opinion, it's the best shot of the whole movie. I can honestly say it left me wanting more. However, as the movie progresses, this kind of direction for the werewolf is dropped completely, and we get to see him more fully, and it kind of loses the charm, because now he just looks like a weird, angry dog. The whole last act kind of falls flat for me if I'm being honest. It just seems like after he turns into a werewolf for the first time, the movie doesn't know what to do. There's been this build-up for him to transform with the upcoming full moon, and it's so satisfying when it happens that maybe it should have been the final act itself. Because then, he's just a doofy guy again for a day, and for some reason he turns back into a werewolf the next night, even though they said it had to be a full moon for him to transform for the first time. Is the moon just still full enough for him to transform? I don't know. I didn't like that it's just so quickly round 2 for the werewolf. The nurse and doctor involve themselves loosely in the plot, but things just kind of wrap up quickly and it's over. Wasn't thrilled with the ending, but maybe that's just because 20 minutes ago I was riding a real high. There is more to the ending. I'm being a little hard on it. There's a subplot or 2 I haven't covered because I think this is a movie you should see if you haven't. Without the excellent scenes I described above, this movie would probably be a 2 out of 5 for me, but since those scenes exist and are definitely 5-star scenes, that bumps the overall movie up to a 3 in my book. Weird movie rating calculus, I know. I'm just saying, this movie isn't the best thing in the world, but it is quirky and fun and light, It also gives you a tasty morsel of body horror and a good old-fashioned werewolf killing spree. For a movie that's only 90 minutes long, I think it's worth your time this Halloween season. If you enjoyed this review, then please subscribe so you don't miss next week's horror gem. We're jumping ahead a few decades to say hello to Shia LaBeouf and a movie that freaked me out as a middle schooler. Thank you all so much for sticking around this long. Have you seen An American Werewolf in London? Did you like it? Do you think I'm being too hard on it, or am I giving it too much of a pass? Are there any nurses in your life you'd like to nibble on? As always, feel free to let me know in the comments. Maybe even type out your own horror gem so people can check it out this Halloween. Until next time, that's about that.